All right, so good morning and welcome to our online webinar, There Be Dragons, Transitioning Through the Unknown. And this is part 4, No More Fears, Making the Transition Stick. So my name is Sarah Haffenden and I'm the Marketing Communications Manager at UKZN Extended Learning, also known as UEL. So in case you're unfamiliar with UEL, we are the continuing education of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and we offer all of the short courses on behalf of the university. So we're offering these webinars as we are in full support and compliance with the directive of a national lockdown, which was issued to address the COVID-19 pandemic. So we've embraced the changes and have launched a number of projects aimed at providing free access to learning materials during this lockdown period. So one of these projects is our online learning webinars. So this webinar forms part of a 4-part series entitled There Be Dragons, Transitioning Through the Unknown. So this is part 4, No More Fears, Making the Transition Stick. Part 1, 2, and 3 are available on our website. Our webinars will continue throughout July and August and will be offered once a week on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. But please take a look at our final slide at the end of this webinar for further details on upcoming webinars, or you can visit our website at www.ukznextendedlearning.com. So please note that due to the nature of this webinar, we will not be able to address raised hands and questions throughout the presentation. So please would you post all comments and questions in the Q&A box, and these will be addressed at the end of the webinar. So we'll also allow for live questions at the end. So if you would like to ask a question live, you just raise your hand and then we will open up your mic for that. So I'd now like to introduce you to our guest speaker for today. It's Zinhle Mpangoza. So Zinhle is a seasoned organizational development specialist, a digital transformation and cultural strategist. Zinhle has spent the past decade understanding organizational behavior and facilitating solutions that transform their way of being, policies and processes that, when implemented, profoundly improve operational effectiveness and competitive advantage. Her professional experience and exposure is a mix of digital change management, cultural and leadership development. Her expertise and experience emanate from working in major consulting firms and across industries such as the public sector, retail, mining, and financial services. She's a doctoral candidate researching the future of work. She is deeply passionate about her role of supporting organizations design human-centric innovations by leveraging organizational culture, employee engagement, and effective change management. Zinhle specializes in the identification and transformation of belief systems that restrain business and personal progress, and is a recipient of the 2018 Inspiring 50 Award for Women in STEM. So Zinhle is currently the Transnet Executive Manager for Group Talent and Transformation. So welcome, Zinhle, and over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming back. Do apologize for not being able to make last week's session, as you might have seen the notification that I too contracted the much feared COVID-19, and I hope my showing up today will show that it can be overcome. Not that it should be taken any lightly. I wish it upon no one. They usually say you're not even your worst enemy. I don't do the enemy type, but it's definitely something that we are all vulnerable to. There is no one who can say they're immune to. I know the scientists have gone to a story about that. And just a little bit on sharing my journey, not the long one, but the one about the vulnerability, when I say that not everyone, people are not immune to it. So I traveled to China some years back during the initial SARS virus, which is very similar to this one. And the first time it broke out in South Africa, the COVID-19, my best friend, whom I was with in a car, eating out of the same plate, sitting on the same couch, watching a movie, started having symptoms that were like, friend, I think you might have the bug. And the following day I said to her, you know what, please go and check yourself if you don't have the rota, because I think you might have the symptoms. But I wasn't too bothered because I kept telling everyone, no, I'm immune to the stuff. I almost died in China. So I've got all the immunities against this thing, so I'm all good. Then when my friend's phone call came through to say, no, she actually called her doctor. This was before lockdown. And her doctor was like, you ain't coming to my rooms. Please stay where you are and drink a lot of water with a lot of Panado. Now, that put fear of any form in my system, like, oh my word. Okay, so now that means me and my kids need to quarantine until her results come back. But I still had that thing in me that, no, man, you know, I will observe all the protocols, but nah, I think I'm good. I'm not going to get this thing. So I had the slight symptoms at that time. That was at the beginning of March. And because the view was that I'm immune. I've been through the worst of this thing. I almost died in China. I got the original form of this thing. I don't have the copy of it. Now, second time around, where I attended a meeting at work where somebody was actually ill from this thing. And I have no idea why he came to work. And he subsequently was hospitalized. And then we were advised to go and get tested. I was extremely angry. I was livid because I was like, oh, I have to go and quarantine or self-isolate again, you know, and that means I have to take my whole family through the same process again. Now, that being said, was the lesson in now having to be positive. One of the things that I learned, which was why I say that we are not immune to it, even though scientists might say something different, was one of the doctors at work advised us of two things. That firstly, if you've got the mild version of it, your body does not generally develop the capacity to develop the kind of immunity that you would want. And if it does, it doesn't last longer than 2 months. So it has an expiry date. The second part of it was that if you get severely ill and you do develop some form of immunity or antibodies, those antibodies also have an expiry date. So my China acquired ones had long expired, because the longest that those antibodies last apparently at the moment, because as you know, the studies are changing day by day, is at most 2 years. So the best thing is just rather adhere to all the protocols that are mentioned and do the best that you can to avoid by wearing your mask. I mean, last night we discovered that it's also now aero spray, whatever aero spread, which means it's airborne as well. So the 1 meter, 2 meter story it's just got complex. All right. So chances of picking it up are that much more now than before. Right. That being said, is that in terms of, obviously, if you've kind of been unfortunate enough to contract it, it is possible to get out of it alive. It's just that during the period you are balancing between life and death, like literally, you know, but it is something that can be overcome. Back on the subject of no more fears and making transformation stick, I'd like to run a quick poll on just where you guys think and you're about change and transformation. So I'll ask Sarah to put up the poll and let's see what your thinking is. So the first one is change and transformation the same thing? What do you think? Okay, I think, let's see, I'm getting more people. All right, we've had 10 out of 17. Maybe we can move on to the next one. Interestingly enough, 90% of your responses say that it's not the same, and 10% says, yes, it's the same thing. Let's see the second question. With change resistance, is there such a thing as positive resistance? Okay, we're gonna close off now. Right, so all of you agree that there is such a thing as positive resistance. It's the first time that I've had everyone agree on that one, that there is such a thing as positive resistance. Let's see the last one. Can behavior change be achieved without deliberate interventions? All right, we wrap it right there. So 91% says no and 1% says yes. So it would be interesting to see how at the end of today's session, we'll have a view of if your position is still the same. So getting started, without further ado, Sarah, you can remove the poll.
You just also have to click it off. It's removed from everyone else. It's just there for you if you want to.
So what happens?
You just click the X on the top.
X on the top. Okie dokie. All right. So right. So generally let's see where all the correct buttons here that normally move this thing. So in terms of just defining change management, it's basically, we say that it's a critical tool that ensures employee behavior will support whatever strategic objectives of an organization may be. Whether right now in South Africa and the world, we are having a whole integrated approach to dealing with COVID. And that was one thing that even didn't give any of us an opportunity for any form of change management. It boom landed on us, and then everybody had to come together and find a solution on how do we all change to survive. And it's generally put as a responsibility of HR and whoever else, but really it's about taking people through a journey. And because it's one constant that does not change, it's always there. So a change in terms of what that is, it's a constant thing that you find all the time. And then when you're defining change versus transformation, change is basically the easiest physical thing. So for example, it is, let's say, changing a job, for example. You change from being working for company A to working for company B. Or it's changing a system, we can say as well, all right? Changing from working from PowerPoint to working in Excel. Transformation, on the other hand, is a psychological process because it requires the person whom the change is happening to go through various changes in their psyche, in their conduct, and in how they do the work that they do. Sometimes system changes require transformation as a form of an intervention, in that the people to not to adhere to the changes in a system. All right. So let's say maybe we have an accounting system. It's always easy and comfortable to do what you've always known, which is let me complete this in an Excel. Then you get introduced into a system that is a little bit more complex as far as you're concerned. It's so much easier to stick to the Excel rather than to go to that other type of system. Now that requires a behavior change, and it requires a transformative journey to be taken through. So the conversation today is about making transformation stick, and it's looking more at behavior change. And I chose this one because of the period we're finding ourselves in. So much as the subject that is business and work related, the COVID system has hit us in the work and private life. So it's about identifying tools and behavior changes that we know we can adapt, and also creating an awareness that there's a particular way that we all respond and go through with change. So it's not so much that people resist change, they resist being changed. So that's a difference. So it's not changing the phone that I have that I'm not happy about, but I do not like to have to change who I am and how I conduct myself that people resist. All right. So in a short agenda of what we're going to be going through is basically we're going to cover the change curve and the behavior change, as well as how do you then make it stick? How do you make that change stay? Because as I've said, it's the only consistent that we find in the world that we are living in. Should I stick to this? Yeah, right. So I just need to move this little screen. If you guys can just give me a moment to minimize the screen so that it doesn't get in the way. Right. Now, in terms of the change curve, it is informed by a lady who used to study, she was a psychologist, and she studied grief and how people experience grief. And it is very similar to how all of us experience change. We go through a similar pattern as human beings when we are confronted with a situation that changes our life or how we work or how we normally carry out certain things. Whether it's, I've got a doctor's report that says that I need to lose 20 kilograms because I've got cholesterol problems or whatever it may be. The first thing that all of us as human beings, we go through a similar pattern. Now, at times, some people jump some stages, but we all at some point go back to one stage or another. And it's good to first understand what are the behavioral patterns that you will experience when you are leading or managing a change. So the first part usually is denial. Now, I will use, again, COVID-19 in South Africa. When the news broke of COVID-19 in December, we were in a party state as a country. And we all thought, wow, China has gone and built a whole lot of hospitals. I don't know how many hospitals. They built, I think, a hospital in 6 weeks or something like that. We're like, oh, wow, go Chinese. You guys are really doing it. And at some point, when the situation got closer and closer, there were some funny ads about other bears wearing masks and the Corona bear sitting by itself and being isolated. So we started to make jokes about it. And at some point, which was now getting a little more disappointing for South Africans, there was a video that did rounds where a whole lot of young people, in some clip, it looked like it was both young and adults in Sun City. It looked like they were in the Valley of the Waves there in Sun City. And in the other one was, I think, in Khayelitsha. They were all in a club or a disco or a braai or whatever the situation is. Those were not in the valley. And they were all making this song about Corona. And they were like all laughing and making a big joke about it. And I remember looking at that video clip and thinking, in this setup, they're all squashed in one room, having a nice jaw. And what are the chances that one of them might have already contracted it? And we're all making a joke. But that's exactly natural. We had a similar experience with one of the presidents, in fact, two of the presidents in the world, Donald Trump and the president of Brazil. Nah, this thing is just a slight cold. And in any case, sometimes every now and again, people die from a cold. It's not a big deal. Something the Chinese made, it's going to go away. Now, it's natural. When people are in the denial space, they either deny the severity or impact that situation or change might have on their lives, or that or they deny its existence altogether. It's not going to happen. It's not true. You get a doctor's results that you do not like. No, these are not true. Absolutely untrue. It's not going to happen. And when I think of it myself as well, I think maybe that was my first phase when my best friend contracted it, and I'm like, oh no. I've been through this. I almost died in China, became lucid whilst I was there, and I have developed the required antibodies, so it's not going to happen to me. But all of you guys, make sure that you do all the right things because I'm safe. I'm okay. It's not going to happen to me. It's natural because it's shock. That's the first thing that we get. In South Africa, we had shock, and then we started seeing the New Zealanders and the Australians all buying toilet paper. Some people started thinking about the same thing, that, okay, maybe now we need to also go and do the same stuff, simply because there wasn't enough information. Now, to deal with this particular phase is just when we need to get information and communicate effectively. Once we've got over the denial, and we realize the truth of the matter, that no, these are your results. This is your situation. This is your divorce papers you're looking at. The next part is frustration. Now, with frustration comes anger. Like I said, after I got that call from work, I was livid. I was furious. I was angry with the guy. Why on earth did he come to work knowing that he's sick? And then number two, because I remember marking the register when the lady came with the pen, I always have hand sanitizer in my handbag. I said, sorry, lady, I do not mean to be offensive to you, but please, can you use my hand sanitizer to clean your pen? And can you just step a little bit aside? And I signed the register. So I'd taken care of myself as far as I was concerned. then rocks up a dude at work. The reasons I thought I was angry that why was I dragged into a meeting that is a physical meeting when the whole country has just come out from lockdown and we know the protocols? 2, I've done all that is possible for me to be safe. 3, why did this guy rock up at work with this thing? And 4, the one who signed him in, because when they looked at the register, he wrote there that I've got a cold, I'm sick, I've got a flu. Okay. Now, the one who marked the register and saw that, do they not understand why it's important to ask those questions? That it's not just about filling in a form. It can impact somebody else's life. And anyway, and I was all upset and angry that now I have to put my children through the whole same thing again. We have to be isolated and blah, blah, blah. Now, that's normal. The bad thing about this state of frustration is that it also, some people then slide further down to depression, where they lose a sense of, I don't have control. This thing is happening to me. And then there are fears about what it means. There are fears of people dying. There are fears of people losing jobs if it's a system. There are fears of how am I going to cope if it's a divorce? How am I going to, what is going to be my identity outside of what I've always known? And others become disruptive in their state of frustration and depression. And this is a part whereby if you are leading, encouraging, supporting, is where you need to listen. You are listening to hear what is the cause of the fear. What is a person afraid of? What is the cause of anger? Are they angry with themselves for not having done enough? Are they angry with what is outside their control? What is the problem, so that you can support them correctly with the right information and what is relevant to them? And how then you help them to journey out of this. Now, after this period of depression and frustration, people then move on to the next thing. Okay, I'm here, locked up in my room, in my house. I have nowhere else to go. What else can I do? We are all under lockdown. Our businesses are frustrated and whatever else. We are all in the same boat. What can we do? What is possible? You know, then people start wanting to hear more information about what they are in. They want to learn more about what can enable them. And they want to read and they want to see what others who have gone through the same are currently doing. And slowly they start to accept the circumstance. And this is when they want to test theories, they want to explore what is being said, and they start then moving upward. And this is when you need a lot more support and encouragement, because once you're just a little bit up the curve, it's also positive to slide back into depression, depending on the support that you have. And if the experiments you take trip you and you fall, it's natural that you might want to go back to the comfort zone and to do what you've always done, which works. But then it's about ensuring that you celebrate the little wins, that you encourage and you build. Then people then get to the decision whereby they decide what they're going to do to get out of that ditch. And then eventually they get to where they integrate with the rest of everybody else who has been through the journey or who's currently going through the journey. Right. Now, one of the things that as I've shared my story, and I've shared that it's natural that we all go through a particular behavior or patterns when we are confronted with a serious change that is a transformation or that's transformational. I'd like for you to reflect on where you are, whether it's in the context of South Africa as an economy. Economically, we are on a meltdown. As a business, where you are employed, when you can see your customers are less than what your productivity is not as it was, or in terms of your health, you know, where do you think you might be in that curve? And what feelings and thoughts are currently going with you in this particular? And where do you think are your colleagues and family and community? And besides time, because we all say your time heals all wounds and time. Okay, we don't have time, we are here. Besides time, what could help you to progress through along these various phases of transition. So I'd like for you to just reflect on that as I continue with the session. So change is hard to some. It's not an easy thing because as humans, we are creatures of habit. And habits come from our thinking. They come from our temperament. They come from our values. They come from how we've been socialized. There's a whole lot of things that influence how we engage with change. And this particular picture you are looking at is a true picture of somebody when the city was being redesigned. He held on to his rights as a landowner and said, I will not change. I will not participate in where you are going. And I am holding my ground. And at times, it could be the manner in which he was approached. It could be that his values, as I've said, there are many things. It could be the values that he holds that for him, this project and the manner in which he was consulted or not consulted, it triggered certain thing around his values. Or there are sentiments that he holds dear that he is like, no, it's not going to happen. Now, part of the resistance to change is that the positive aspects of resistance, because we've seen that it does happen at times, positive resistance is where a person is like, you're not, so you hear about a change coming your way, but you are curious to know what informed the change. So I'm not resisting it negatively because I don't want to, but I want to be informed. And the recommendations that are being given, what is the scientific evidence behind that? What is the business case for this organization choosing to change or transform? What will enable me to participate in the change? Do I need new skills? Do I need to be trained? Whereas the negative part is where a person's just completely immobilized and they feel they do not understand. But in their not understanding, they are not open to being trained into knowing. So the positive part is, I'm being honest, I don't understand. Help me to understand. And the denial, as I've said, there's no way that's going to change. And then anger, when it's not going away. And then the bargaining, as I've mentioned, is where people then, in the positive way, they're trying to get a win-win. All right. So, okay, if I do this, will I get that? All right. If we all adhere to the protocols of COVID-19, are you going to open up the economy? And with depression, it's sliding downwards rather than moving up in terms of, okay, it's not going to happen. But the one that's positive is that, okay, let's test. Let's test and see what happens if we try the right thing. And when you take this into a personal perspective, now I'm starting to talk about the behavioral change that you have a responsibility for. So it's not necessarily in the work environment. And that's why I say I'm going to balance between work and our current reality, which is the COVID-19. All right. I know they call it Black Swan. I do not agree that it's a Black Swan event because a Black Swan event means it's something that doesn't exist. Now, they did find that there was a black swan that sometimes exists. So it just means it's random, it's once off, but it doesn't mean that it does not exist because scientists, some of them have been saying that there is such a thing that can happen. I mean, the fact that in 2008, 2009, we had a similar thing. But when we now look at ourselves and our responsibility around how can we take ourselves up that curve now that we know that we all go through some kind of cycle of change where it doesn't matter when others start at the top. In fact, other people start ready to action, like, oh, I'm ready, I'm excited. Finally, something new and great is coming, only to realize that you had false hope. You didn't have the proper data. So people are often unwilling or resistant to change during the early stages, but they eventually develop a proactive and committed approach to changing a behavior. Now, the model that I'm sharing here demonstrates that it's not as easy as it seems. So that's why I asked the question about, can behavior change automatically happen? Human beings don't generally change completely unless something drastic happens in their lives. Yes, you may find that some smokers, my uncle was one of those, who one day just decided that he's going to quit smoking. He took his packet of Rothmans at the time, I don't know if there's still such a cigarette, put it on the table, said he'll never smoke again, and he's never ever smoked. But we don't know what had happened in his mind or what gave him that wake-up call, but he was one of those people. He didn't go through any intervention, didn't practice anything. He just one day came, put the box of Rothmans down, said he's never going to touch it again, and he has never. But that's rare. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen as easily. It often requires gradual progression of small steps towards a particular end goal. Now, in terms of taking responsibility, now when you become aware of the circumstances you are finding yourself in, and I've mentioned there could be many, all right, you need to reflect and rethink your behavior. Analyze yourself and your actions. In terms of my behavior, and I'll give you the scary example about even possible exposures to COVID-19. When my friend contacted it, I became extra cautious. I would sanitize my hands a million times. I mean, my kids, we've got sanitizer everywhere. Like you walk to the kitchen, you sanitize, you walk out of it, you sanitize, you do this and that one. And I also developed a new habit with my friend. One, because we realized that, okay, this thing when we're reading about it is that it attacks or attaches itself or enters your body through the nasal cavity. And it's not heat resistant. So it dies from heat. That was our basic understanding. So if we choose that every time we go outside our homes, it means we've already contacted it. The minute we get home, we boil water, put it in a small tub, steam to kill it. And I did this religiously until my friend got well. After she got well, I became lax. Why? Because the masks were in. Now we're all wearing masks to the shops, and there were sanitizers everywhere. The problem with this is that certain things make you relax in your behavior. This is the scary example I want to give. There's a lot of people who are infectious but are asymptomatic. They don't have symptoms. They themselves don't even know that they are positive. And I make myself as an example. If I hadn't attended that meeting, well, I don't know if I would have got it, but if at work it wasn't compulsory to go and test because we'd been exposed, I might not have known because I didn't have the common symptoms that are known. Now, imagine this is me with my mask on, going to Spar, Pick and Pay in Woolworths to buy a bunch of bananas. I doubt any one of you here has ever picked up a bunch of bananas, big as it is, and taken all of it home. Why? Because half of it is bruised, half of it is looking like that, other is green and whatever else. So you separate. Now, this is me, who's highly infectious, doesn't know it, at Spar, separating the bunch. I take what I need, I walk out. I have no intention of infecting anyone. Another innocent soul comes through the shop. The same bunch of bananas that I have just covered in this COVID thing, the person picks it up. It's in their hands and they take it home with them. They're wearing their mask. Now, that's where the behavior comes in. The other thing that I started to develop with my friend, we agreed on, was when you get home with the groceries, painful as it is, sanitize it. You'd have water in the sink with Milton or a little bit of bleach or whatever. Just take things through it. Wipe every packet. Just take it as you are already in it. And all these things have it. The minute I got into gloves and masks, whatever, I stopped that. And this is where then I start saying in terms of awareness, now that you know, rethink your behavior. Analyze yourself and your actions. If I've just shown you the picture of picking up a bunch of bananas, you are not sanitizing them. You're not sanitizing your hands as much. You take them home and you give the bananas to your kids. You think of the rest of the story. Assess the risks of that current behavior. And then move yourself up the curve of risk by becoming understanding of the severity of where we are. what would be the impact of you taking home a bunch of bananas that an infectious person has taken, touched, and you've not sanitized it? What are the pros and cons of you choosing to sanitize them or handing them over to your kids or your parents? Identify what would stop you from doing anything else. And then start to prepare. What will I do differently from now on? Write down your goals. I need to stay alive, dudes, until after the next 3 years. I ain't going to no hospital. I'm not contacting this thing that there is. And you know what's the worst part of it? People asked me last week was that I'm waiting for my body to respond or fight. Because there's no treatment that you are taking that at the end of the treatment, you are guaranteed you'll be well. You are waiting on something that you have no control over. You do not know what are the thresholds of your body. And worst, you don't know where it's attacking you, because it's no longer about the lungs. It attacks the mind as well. If you don't have enough oxygen going to your brain, there's a whole lot of other things that happen to you. Now, what will be your plan of action from now on? What are the things that can motivate you, that can encourage you to move further up? And then start actioning that. Now, the nice thing about behavior change is that we love instant rewards. And that's why Facebook, LinkedIn, and all these social spaces, whatever the other one that has pictures, I can't remember what it's called, Instagram. It's so popular because people love instant recognition. So how can you reward your success? Because you're starting to build a new habit, right? Seek out social support where you need it. Identify triggers that may lead you to relapse, like I did, as I explained to you. I found myself in the same boat again because, recognize, I could have steamed, maybe, I don't know. Recognize the barriers to success. And then the maintenance part. Now that you've learned through the whole thing, you've gone all the way up, you've lost that weight, you've successfully adapted to the system, you've successfully done this. How do you maintain that? How do you make it stick? By developing coping strategies for temptation, because it's going to come. It's going to come that, you know what, I'm pressed for time, there's a deadline, and I'm quicker with Excel than that system. How do you resist that temptation to fall into the comfort zone, what you know, what you're comfortable with, and you've been doing all along, right? Because in any behavior change, relapses are common. And then they put you right back to depression because you feel like you failed. You feel like you're a disaster, that you'll never make it again. So you need to plan for that in mind as well. And knowing that it's common. You know, you might trip, but it's not the end of the world. Right? Now, life begins at the end of your comfort zone, or at the end of your comfort zone. Now, the thing about the comfort zone, when I describe it, it's like that same old chair that you sit on every day when you come back from work and you watch TV. It has even developed the shape of your bum because that's what you do all the time, and it's been a tradition. But what if at the end of that comfort zone was something else that you could consider? And let's have a look at a clip that's slightly longer than I normally have, but there's a lot of lessons from this. It's a very old lesson about who moved my cheese, but try and apply it to transformational change that you might be going through right
now. Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson is one of the top-selling business books of the past decade. It's a charming and entertaining book that uses a fable to show how to handle change, which can be stressful in work and life. In the book's foreword, management expert Ken Blanchard says, "Cheese is a metaphor for what we want in life, be it a job, a relationship, money, or organizational success. We spend time seeking what we want in the maze. In the book, the maze is a literal one. Our task," he says, "is to learn to change or move with the cheese in a way that helps us get what we really want, especially in these times of rapid change." The book is in 3 sections. 1. A gathering. It's a class reunion about trying to deal with changes in their lives. 2. The actual story of Who Moved My Cheese, which is the fable the people at the reunion read. And 3. The discussion, or a talk about how they are going to use the story in their work and lives. Let's get into the book. We begin with The Gathering. The book begins with a lunch gathering of former classmates in Chicago the day after their high school reunion. All are trying to cope with unexpected changes, and most of them admit they aren't great at handling them. Michael shares how he used to fear change in his business until he heard a funny little story called Who Moved My Cheese? Once he passed the story around to people in his company, the business did much better, and it altered how Michael looked at change. Now, we move into the heart of the book. The story. Who moved my cheese? The story features two mice named Sniff and Scurry, and two little people who are as small as mice named Hem and Haw. Every day they put on jogging suits and running shoes and hit the maze in search of cheese. One day they all find cheese at Cheese Station C. Hem and Haw believed that having cheese makes you happy. Once they found cheese at Cheese Station C, they got very comfortable and expected the cheese to always be there. They took the cheese for granted and even moved their homes closer, creating, unfortunately, a false sense of security. They assumed their hard work in finding the cheese justified an endless supply of it. Sniff and Scurry behaved differently. They followed their instincts and paid attention to small changes. They did not cling to beliefs about how things should be. One morning, when Cheese Station C had no more cheese, they quickly went off in search of new cheese. At the lack of cheese, Hem and Haw freaked out. Happiness, they thought, was connected to finding the cheese where they expected to find it, and they believed that if your cheese is important, you must hold on to it. Who moved my cheese? Hem yelled. This is so unfair. Even when there was no cheese, they kept coming back morning after morning, expecting to find cheese, but they didn't. Finally, Haw started to laugh at himself. Haw suggested that they maybe go and find new cheese, but Hem doesn't agree. What they don't know is Sniff and Scurry already found a huge supply of cheese at Cheese Station N as they searched the maze for new cheese. Haw realizes the old cheese isn't going to show up and that it was time to start another search. He felt more alive when he decided to move on. He left a note for Hem. If you do not change, you can become extinct. And what would you do if you weren't afraid? As Haw journeys out into the maze, he writes messages to himself, hoping Hem will see them and understand the wisdom he is trying to share. Recalling the cheese at Cheese Station C, Haw admits that the cheese had gotten smaller and older and didn't taste good. Change would not have taken him by surprise had he watched what was happening and anticipated change. He wrote, "Smell the cheese often so you know when it is getting old." Although he felt fear, Haw moved in a new direction. He began trusting what lay ahead, even though it was unknown. He felt good and wondered why. Then he knew why and wrote, "When you move beyond your fear, you feel free." In the maze, Haw started having fun. He imagined eating the many cheeses he liked and imagined enjoying the tastes of new cheese. Then he wrote, "Imagining myself enjoying new cheese leads me to it." On his journey, Haw found bits of new cheese and began to get stronger. He wanted to go back to see if Hem would come along. As he did this, he wrote, "The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you find new cheese." When he got back to Cheese Station C, he offered Hem new cheese, but Hem said he didn't think he'd like it because it was not what he was used to. Because he was not ruled by fear and didn't feel as weak as he did when he stayed in Cheese Station C with no cheese, Haw ventured back out on his own. He realized it is safer to search in the maze than remain in a cheeseless situation. Haw realized the fear you let build up in your mind is worse than the situation that actually exists. He'd been so afraid of never finding new cheese that he didn't start looking. Now, just looking was becoming exciting. His beliefs were evolving. He no longer believed that cheese should stay in one place or change was wrong. Haw believed relocated cheese and change were natural, whether expected or not. He then wrote, "Old beliefs do not lead you to new cheese." Haw saw that new beliefs encouraged new behaviors. He knew that when you change what you believe, you change what you do. You can believe change will hurt you, or that new cheese will help you embrace change. Ha then wrote, when you see you can find and enjoy new cheese, you change course. By this time, Ha saw if he had embraced change sooner and left Cheese Station C earlier, he'd be in better shape. Finally, he hoped him would read the handwriting on the wall and find his way. Ha wrote, noticing small changes early helps you adapt to bigger changes to come. Just as Ha was letting go of the past and adapting to the future, he found new cheese. Cheese Station Inn had piles of cheese of all kinds. Sniff and Scurry were there too. Ha jumped into the new cheese and ate a ton. Finally, Ha summarizes what he has learned and leaves it for him and for the reader. It's called The Handwriting on the Wall. Here it is. And lastly, the discussion. After Michael was done telling the story, him and his classmates agreed to get together and talk about the story as it applied to some of their own experiences in work and life. We at Calibrain invite you to click on the participate button to see.
Right, so that's the journey on how you can no more have fears about change. Moving into facing COVID, now that you no longer fear the change. Normally I'd spend time on debriefing that video clip, but it was just the best way I could address the fear of change. It's about holding on to old belief systems. It's about fears of the unknown and fearing what is a comfort zone. And that's why I started with the comfort zone, that before you get to the part where you can face and confront your fears and whatever is facing you, there's some lessons that need to be made quickly. So that was a quick summary of that. Now, what I'm going to take you through here quickly is the journey of facing COVID. And it basically uses what is a therapy that is called ACT. It's acceptance commitment therapy. All right. And I've said that, and face COVID is basically just exactly what it says. It's the first part is, in terms of the steps that you can use, is focus what's within your control. Because we know that we're all going through that journey. Fear, anxiety are all inevitable. We're all going to go through that. And we are all going to, at some point in our lives, be confronted with this, whether through our family, through our friends, or through our colleagues. And it is a journey that we are going to go over. Now, we all have far more control over our behavior than we do of our thoughts and feelings. So you can control and manage your behavior, but your thoughts, they just fly in your head, just like a bird. You can't stop birds flying over your head, all right? So we are all going to be experiencing some emotional storms as we go through this. And this process kind of helps you to drop your anchor, balance, and face it. So how do you start? It's by acknowledging your feelings and your thoughts. Because what you ignore persists. So you need to find a way of, number one, kindly acknowledge whatever it is that's showing up inside of you. Your thoughts, your emotions, the memories, sensations, and urges. And it may be easier to try and skip this part because it's an exercise that I'm talking about. But if you skip A in the whole process, sorry, I'm being distracted by my dog, who now wants me to go and open a door somewhere else for her, but we need to go through this. This is part of working from home, right? So you can't ignore A because, like as I've mentioned, you need to first be kind to yourself, acknowledge what you're going through. And just one moment. It's important to acknowledge all that you are currently going through so that you can be able to deal with it, whether it's uncomfortable, because sometimes you can have some difficult and uncomfortable emotions, but you need to acknowledge them. And then once you've acknowledged them, you come back to your body. Connect with your physical body in terms of don't run away and be carried away by those thoughts and emotions. And because you're not trying to escape. The aim is to remain aware of your thoughts and your feelings, because like I said, you can manage your actions. Oh, sorry, if you can just give me a moment, because now she's starting to cry. But who invited you? My apologies. Right. The aim is to get to a point whereby you are completely aware of your thoughts and your emotions and feelings so that you can gain as much control over the physical actions, because the saying goes is your thoughts become your actions and your actions become your behaviors and your behaviors become your habits and your habits becomes your destination or destiny. All right. So the whole process of this is the awareness of your thoughts, emotions, and feelings so that you can choose what actions you take thereafter. And you can have, because when you have that control, then it's much easier. Then engage in what you are doing. Get a sense of where you are and refocus your attention on the activity that you're doing. So whether it's, if you need to get back, it's about whether you're breathing in or whether you are physically stretching, but get a sense of control of what you are engaging in and what activities you want to do. And the whole point of the exercise is basically to repurpose and redirect your actions rather than your actions automatically happening as a result of the automatic emotions that I've said. As I've said, emotions and feelings automatically happen. And what you're trying to do is engage and be deliberate about what actions you take so that you are not stuck in depression because of maybe you're facing this terrible disease and you are choosing what then you're going to do and then make a commitment to action. So it means effective action rather than the depressive action, guided by your core values, what you believe. So you want to take actions that will truly are important to you. So whether it's choosing to listen to music, whether it's choosing to meditate, or it's choosing to offer help maybe to somebody else, but whatever actions that will help you to bring you out of those difficult thoughts and feelings, and then open up. Make room for difficult feelings by being kind to yourself. You know, like how they say on the airplane, before you put on the oxygen mask and help somebody else, put it on yourself. Being kind to yourself is the oxygen mask that you would put on an airplane before you help somebody else. And then in terms of the values, those are the ones that you remain core to and that take you through. Identify the resources for help and assistance and offer help and assistance to others. I mean, when my friend was sick, literally every other day I was sending food to her house. I was doing groceries for her. She stayed longer in quarantine than other people because in terms of South Africa, we were not yet ready in March. You know, so I had to do grocery shopping for her. I had to make sure that she has enough food and just be there on a daily basis with her to walk the journey with her. So that is what we are needing to do for ourselves and for other people. And then lastly, disinfect and distance physically, you know. So that was just by the by towards facing COVID. And hopefully that helps somebody. Moving to the next page, this thing is frozen. Now making change stick. You know, time always flies so quickly with these sessions. I'm going to have to fly through this one. So how do you make it stick? Now that you've achieved the change, you've understood the whole valley that people go through, is that basically changing people's ways of working means changing their mindset. You're changing their behavior. And it needs reinforcement with several mechanisms to make it stick. Firstly, teach people to cue themselves. It's a habit. Habits are formed by little deliberate actions that we choose daily. So when people start to being able to identify what are the cues, what are the triggers, what triggers me to behave in a particular way, and then on those cues, give them skills on how do you strengthen yourself when you've identified that this is a trigger that makes me behave this way, and what are my beliefs about this? Then change the beliefs and by seeing the benefits of changing that behavior. All right. And then make behavior change easy by rewarding it, as I've mentioned, you know, make it more enjoyable, let it be fun. Because the thing is with behavior change is that the more difficult it is, the less likely that people will comply with that. And the less fun it is, the less people will comply to that. So make it easy, make it fun, give the people the skills to be able to cope with it, capacitate them, give them the right knowledge and skills, they'll be good to go. And then repeatedly reward good behavior, and you'll see that Bob's your uncle. Now, in terms of the basic tools of change management, is that, to make change stick, you'd want to consider certain things. Stakeholder matrix. And I deliberately didn't go into the practices of change management because sometimes, and it happens with new change practitioners, it's focusing on the tools. That do I have the stakeholder matrix? That means I've identified all the different stakeholders and I know what to do with this and the other one. Whereas psychological change is different. It's not just about ticking boxes, but it's about understanding the state of where each person is in that curve and dealing from a psychological perspective, from an understanding and capacitating manner. So yes, you may have your stakeholder matrix, which is just a list of identifying where the different people are and where do they sit on that curve. And your communication plan says that if a person is at depression, this is how I communicate with them. If they're at anger, this is how I communicate with them. If they are at excitement, false hope, whatever, this is how I deal with them. And then your project plan of whatever the journey you're going through. So have you done all the right things in terms of just following then the recipe and the tools of the change management tools, and what are they? Why does the change not stick? We've spoken about resistance. Okay, are people resisting negatively? And how can you change it? Or is it a positive resistance? And what else can make it change? And I've mentioned those various things that you can do. And what else can you reinforce? So some of the basic things, if it's a work environment, is ensuring that you've got leaders sponsoring the change. We've seen with the World Health Organization, shame that guy is painstakingly taking the whole country through this journey, including even when whilst he was doing the news briefing and then he hears that the president of Brazil has contracted the virus. And I'm sure he must have wanted to go, yeah, we told you. But anyway, he had to, maintain his demeanor and wish him well. But again, you need the right sponsorship for any big change. You need the right people leading it, right? And you're needing to engage your stakeholders, which is what you see the World Health Organization, all leaders doing by being visible and having a plan that you take people through and ensure that everything is happening the right way and you are training people in their new ways of behaving. And that's what we've been seeing with all the protocols, with all the teachings, with all the adverts, all right? And then what else do you need? You need to understand that all change is not the same. That's why we spoke about transformation versus basic changing of a laptop versus an Apple iPad or something. Life outcomes are powerfully determined by seemingly trivial repeated acts. Thoughts become actions, which become habits, which become where you end up in life. So we are what we repeatedly do. That's what Aristotle said, and is often quoted as observing. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Likewise, a lifetime of observing human nature led by William James was to conclude life is but a mass of habits, practical, emotional, and intellectual, systematically organized for weal or woe and bearing us irresistibly towards our destiny, whatever the latter may be. So as human beings, if our destinies are informed and dependent on our habits, I think we might just need to start embracing and being conscious of our thoughts and how we choose to behave, because it might end us up in a hospital bed or, God forbid, anywhere else. Now, resilience is necessary because once you find yourself in that circumstance of difficult change, the perception you have, the thoughts and the views you have will determine significantly how your resilience improves, and obviously your health and well-being and how you engage with the world. So it is an important part to be very resilient because it has an impact on your self-esteem, and you need to be able to learn from mistakes, and you need to be able to know that your past is not who you are now, and it is not necessarily the future. And when you set goals for yourself, for example, the steaming of my face every time I come back from Pick and Pay in spite of a mask, is it a realistic goal? Oh yeah, if it means I don't get this thing again. And what skills can I give myself in understanding various things of where I'm currently at? And the ability to accept what is outside of my control, leave it alone. Don't give it space in your head. If you cannot control it with your hands and whatever, get it out of your head. Have self-control by observing what's going on in your mind and developing an optimistic mindset. And as Darwin said, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one that is most responsive to change. And that brings us to the end of our session. Time always flies during these conversations. And we have come to the end. And I'd just love to know, what are you taking out from today? You can share it in your question and A box. I know I can see somebody has put something there. Yeah, so that's the end. We've kind of over by 4 minutes, but I'd love to know what you're walking away with from today and a little bit of that feedback. And whilst I'll give you 2 minutes to think about what you're taking away with, is that obviously if you'd like more from what you've heard, is you can contact UEL through Cindy Swa, and her phone number is right there, 031-260-3796, or Vanusha on the same number ending with 8870, or visit ukznextendedlearning.com, the website, to be able to find out more details. And in terms of what's going on, there's more stuff coming ahead in terms of the upcoming webinars. There's marketing your personal brand during the COVID era. Some of us are needing to probably be self-employed or considering that, or maybe our CVs out there. So how can you market your personal brand? And also the creativity. How can you be able to be more creative in this time? And how do you enhance your organizational creativity through the same period? And then we know Women's Month is coming up in August, and I'm certain it's going to be some exciting topics during that period. Right, so this is the end of our session. And Sarah, there are some questions or comments or feedback in terms of what people are walking away with from today's session. And this is the last of the series. I hope you have enjoyed yourself from There Be Dragons and, having the right attitude and knowing exactly how to confront an unknown terrain, up to a point where you no longer have any fears, because we know that change is constant and you can be able to get over it by managing what is upstairs and what goes on in your mind and choosing the right behaviors that inform your habits and your attitudes and determine between whether you get stuck in the depressed zone or in the action and into the next phase of your life. All right, thank you very much. So let's hear from Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Zinhle. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the last webinar out, last poll now to rate the webinar. We do have a lot of feedback coming through, a lot of positive feedback. There is just one person who wanted you to skip back to the slide with the bicycle. But what we will do is we will also have these slides on our website, and we will send out the link later today. I don't know if you want to go through all the comments, Zinhle. I don't see any questions, but just a lot of comments, and obviously what they've taken out of the series.
It'll be good to hear.
Okay, so I'll start on the chat. So Jenny says thank you so much. She says like Darwin's quotes. Faith says thank you for the informative session. Bridget says want to thank you for a brilliant session. Jenny says you present in such an interesting way. Tsitsi says we get too comfortable with ourselves, especially with the use of masks. People get more relaxed. I've learned to be more vigilant. Mahadea says thank you, Zinhle, very interesting and informative talk. The cheese example is fabulous. And then on the Q&A, I see some of you. Lance says, I think he was questioning something within the talk. Victim mentality results in negative resistance, positive resistance. Richard says, I did come in late, but it was brilliant. Lance says, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And I really enjoyed and learned a great experience. Thank you. VFHAM2 says change is hard, I agree, and also says thank you, brilliant session. Yeah, so thank you, Zinhle, for presenting through your entire series. I think if anyone has missed any of the other webinars that she has done, please go and take a look at our websites. So thank you very much, and we know you're going to be working with us again, especially in Women's Month. Thank you to all our attendees for joining us today and engaging in the sessions. As I said, the video and the slides will be available on our website, so we will send this link out to you. If you have RSVP'd and received the reminder mail, you'll be receiving the link. So do take a look at our upcoming webinars and do RSVP. Yeah, otherwise, we hope you enjoyed the session with us. Thank you, Zinhle, again, and stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Keep safe. Bye.